Hello everyone, welcome. Today is the 5th of July 2023. I want to talk about threshold of pain or acceptance of suffering and how we might differ the West from the East, as it were. The thought came up because I was listening to a conversation between Scott Ritter and Garland Nixon this morning. And Scott Ritter, everybody knows him by now. He was talking about the war, obviously the ongoing war, and he was talking about the fact that the Russians have a threshold of pain which goes very, very deep. He was talking about, the 20 million Russians who have died in the Second World War, and how every year in that military parade that they have, after the military parade, you have ordinary people joining in and carrying their photographs of their relatives who were killed in the war, their great-grandparents, their grandparents, and so that is also part of the parade, that they feel very strongly this loss that they had, and that they are not willing to forget it, and that they feel, the ordinary Russian feels as if their forefathers are looking down on them, and they are saying to them, "We will not forget your sacrifice." In other words, it's very painful to them. They feel it deeply inside, and so I can. When you talk about this threshold of pain, I can see it in their literature. Actually, if you read practically any Russian author, you realize that this threshold of pain, as Scott Ritter calls it, I would say this acceptance of suffering, that they are willing to accept it and keep on as if suffering is expected of life. They just deal with it. They almost expect it. I started thinking about us, about the West, and whether we have this or we don't have this. And it seems that this acceptance of suffering is no longer there. If you look at ourselves, it's perhaps because after the Second World War, our societies went in different ways, right? So our different countries became wealthy, and I know it's not the same for everybody. There are rich and poor everywhere, but I'm talking very generally, you understand. So we were secure, we were safe, we had a certain degree of prosperity, all of us, some more, some less, and so on, but we felt safe, and so we began to lose sight of this acceptance of suffering and not accept it anymore. We tended more, up to now at any rate, to demand almost security. In other words, an emphasis on rights, not so much on duties and so on. So we dealt with it when things went wrong politically, for example. We reacted not as acceptance that life is hard and suffering is part of it. We reacted differently with sarcasm or irony. Well, the two things are different, actually. Let's see. Sarcasm is more defensive, is when, don't know whether you agree with me on this, sarcasm is like a defense that we put up when we are faced with disappointment or disillusionment of hopes. And the way to fight back in some sort of way is with sarcasm. Irony, I see it differently. I see it more as not defensive, but more offensive, intellectually more offensive. You fight back by putting the other guy down, as it were, intellectually. Sarcasm is more defensive. We lost our hope, or we find that we cannot fight back, and we have become a little bit jaded, and we react with that's the way I see it, more or less. But that's not the point. The point is that, as I see it, we react differently to suffering or to pain. And sometimes we don't even want to see it. It has become a means of defense too, to say, look, I don't know about that, I don't want to see it. Bad news, I rather not deal with that. Or conspiracy theories, or that is not true, or whatever it might be. We just don't seem to want to confront it hard on. Okay, let me give you some examples of what I mean, to see if this makes sense. I'm just thinking about it as I go along. But you remember this about a month ago, this Dodgers thing in the Dodgers stadium and so on. Yes, so there were these men dressed as women mocking Catholic nuns and so on. Okay, so Catholics obviously were very much offended, and but perhaps some of you reacted, well, Catholic nuns, but the thing is that it was also a mocking of Christ, yes, on the crucifix. So there were sexual insinuations there with on top, and okay. How did we all react to that? Because after all, whether you are a Christian or not, our culture in the West developed from Christianity. You cannot get away with that. It doesn't matter whether you are a Christian or not. You live in a culture that evolved from Christianity. So you see the crux, the center of the representation of that being totally mocked and abused, and pretty much nothing happened. Some people demonstrated their praying and so on, but the society took it. And you can only take it if you say, I don't really want to deal with that, with all the ramifications of that. So better just put it aside and it will go away. Just a few days ago in New York, again, there were men dressed as women parading in New York City and chanting, "We are coming for your kids, we are coming for your kids." That is what was happening. And the amazing thing is that there were people there and mothers with their children watching and, perfectly happy and applauding the parade. So there is a numbness here about what is happening to us. How perhaps it is a means of self-defense, that self-preservation, that we don't want to acknowledge it. Is too much to take in. If you look at all the ramifications of what that means, is too scary. And so just say, well, it's just a parade. So we are dealing with it by not accepting what is happening, but by pushing it away out of our mind. And this has become very clear since the illness, global illness about 3 years ago. It was too much to take in, so it's too much to take in. What we are finding out now, that perhaps our government knew, and what they were telling us was not exactly the truth, all that. Our government, I mean our administrators, because I keep saying that governments are not independent sovereign governments anymore, that they are all working towards a different master, not necessarily the people of each individual country. So they're administrators, basically, more than individual or governments, independent governments as such. But so during the illness, everyone sort of obeyed and followed and so on. But do you remember a woman, I think it was in Canada, who after taking the medicament got paralyzed or something like that? Certainly her face, part of her face was paralyzed. And she was obviously in pain and suffering greatly, because I think she was a model or an actress, and all of a sudden, half of her face was paralyzed. What was amazing was that she was there on a video saying, "I will do it again. I will do this. I will take this medicament again because it's the right thing to do," and so on. And there she was with. So I was thinking when I saw that, what is going on here? I think not wanting to face the situation is part. I don't even think is cowardice as such. It might be for some people. I think it's a means of self-preservation, that we just don't want to face it. We don't want to accept the suffering of it. In what is happening socially, culturally, and politically, is us not wanting to face that they are there. As I said in so many videos, they are there in your face saying, "This is what we are doing." They were smoked out. They came out with the illness, obviously, and before, as it were, they were hiding or pretending that they were not doing what they were doing, how power was distributed and controlled and so on. But now it's being done openly. And so what is our threshold for this acceptance, this humiliation, perhaps? How much more can we see this abuse of us as citizens? And what is the breaking point here? How long before this erupts? I have said in another video also that what is happening now is that the people in power are keeping the lid on. That is the main point, because things are bubbling underneath. They knew, as I said before, they knew from the Iraq war 20 years ago, when all the demonstrations and anti-war demonstrations and the media, some of the media in favor, some of them against, and so on, but they knew that the media had to be controlled. And so this control has been very effective, and yet things are bubbling underneath. And what they cannot possibly allow is for it to flow out, because there would be a flood, an inundation. Now, this, a flood bursting forth. Okay, so this brings me back to thresholds. Okay, I think we have grown fat. Fat not only in physical terms. Actually, if you see the movies from the 30s and 40s and even 50s, have you noticed that people are all very thin? Of course, there would be overweight people or obese people in that, but most of the people were actually quite thin. We have grown fat in physical terms. We have also, I think, grown fat spiritually or psychologically, if you prefer. In other words, we had our necessities satisfied. We drew our attention not to necessary things, but to being entertained. In other words, we had leftovers, and so we sat down on a chair, on a comfortable chair, and we were entertained. Because we no longer had to fight for survival. So we got accustomed to prosperity. I repeat, obviously, some more, some less, but no longer had to fight for survival. And so our spirit, or our soul, or our heart, call it what you will, just sort of sat down in an armchair too, together with our bodies. It's sort of a peel me a grape kind of thing. So it seems that the threshold of pain for other peoples, in this case for the Russians, as Scott Ritter was saying, is bottomless. For us, we don't want to face it. What is the suffering? What is the threshold for our humiliation? It can be bottomless also, but we are scared. We lost fight. So what will it take for people in the West, for people to eventually react to what is happening in our societies, to react to the lies, the narratives put forward? The realization that we might have been had or played. And we don't want to face that yet. We continue to retreat. I don't want to know. It's a conspiracy theory. It comes down to an unwillingness, I think, perhaps, as I said, not out of cowardice in many people, but out of self-preservation, of not wanting to acknowledge the truth of the situation. And that is what acceptance is. The acceptance of suffering is to be realistic about what is happening to us in our own countries. Acknowledging perhaps our cowardice, or perhaps, as I said, just our self-preservation. So it seems to me that since about 3 years ago, when the people who control society came out wide in the open, it seems as if it was too hard for us to believe. We kind of suffered a moral concussion, as it were. This cannot possibly be true. what is happening is impossible. So we can't, it's like a concussion, and we are there sort of not knowing, going round and round, not knowing in which direction to go. And so that is being used to, oh, look here, look there, whenever something terrible happens, oh, look, a balloon over there, oh, look, some cocaine in the White House, oh, look, this. And we are continuing to not finding direction. It's like as if we are numbing the spirit because of this not acknowledging the truth, the reality of the situation. And if we continue like that, we will continue to be manipulated. I think that in order to get back into shape, physically, spiritually, psychologically, the first thing is we have to become aware and look at truth in its face, becoming aware. It's the equivalent of getting ready. In other words, stop denying what is happening, however painful that might be. That is the acceptance of suffering. Stop saying, no, I don't want to look. You have to. You have to look at it. If we are ill and we have a cancer, it doesn't help us to say, oh, no. We have to start looking at it, looking at the filth, looking at the ugliness, looking at what is happening and becoming aware. In a battle or in sport or whatever, that would be being realistic. In other words, the threshold for us is awareness. We have to become aware. So the end of the bottomless pit of control and humiliation that we are all experiencing is becoming aware and facing the truth. That it's like beginning to exercise again, and then we'll be able to handle whatever else is thrown at us. Okay, yeah. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.